So the first question we have for our podcast to get us started is, have you or have you not turned your heater on in your house this fall season? Who has their heater on right now? Only me? You
No,
guys
sir.
are still holding out, guys. It's been in the
We won't
40s.
turn ours on until mid-November, early December.
That's right. It'll be well into November before that thing gets looked at.
Now, one morning last week, we had the fireplace on, the gas fireplace. To just the kids wanted to sit in front of that while they were getting ready for school.
Take the edge off of the cold.
Yeah.
I have a tenant moving in on Saturday, so I'm sure we will go to normal temperatures. But this morning when I woke up, it was 62 in my house.
Oh, it's beautiful.
There's no way I'm getting out of a bed in a 62-degree house.
I had to live.
I love
that.
When 62 or 65, when it's minus 15 outside, 65 feels like a heat wave.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm just being cheap. I'm trying to conserve energy.
There you go.
It has nothing to do with temperature preference. It's that I can pile on blankets and that costs me nothing.
Look at this.
That's fair.
As long as our body temperature doesn't get to 65, I think we're okay.
Yeah. Well, I've got mine going full steam ahead, guys. I've got two. I'm a tough guy. It's not for me. It's for my two tiny dogs that sleep downstairs.
Oh, well, my dogs sleep in the bed with me, so they just move closer.
It's a shame that dogs used to live outside before humans brought them inside.
I know. I gotta say though, Abby is so fat that she doesn't need any. I mean, that dog, she's supposed to be 5 pounds. I swear she's 10. And
really, I haven't seen Abby in a while. Okay,
let me go get her.
Oh, he's gonna get Abby so we can see how chubbo she's got. Well, Rob, if I didn't have two dogs, I might have to get married again.
I've always laughed. No, bring them in is great. I've always laughed when they're like, hey, they're cold too. Well, what did they do before we brought them in?
Yeah. Well, they're just good companions. That's all I can say.
Gotten a little.
Oh my goodness, she did get a little bit chunky.
Look at this little tater. She's a little potato.
She is. Look at Abby.
She needs a haircut. Abby's my little tater tot.
Yeah.
Haircut and a workout.
Yep.
Welcome to Second Take at Eastlake, a podcast of Eastlake Community Church in Irmo, South Carolina. You are invited to join us any Sunday at 9 or 11.
That is exactly what she needs. Like, why are we doing that? I was sleeping.
And you woke me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So so you guys ready to get on this podcast official topics here and talk about something good?
Yes.
Perfect. So let's see.
Rob
was the one teaching this week. And what was the official title, Rob?
I will share with you.
I will share with you. In like top 3 takeaways that we would say off of this sermon. Then we'll get into some of the stuff that we wanted to dive deeper in. But like, if you could narrow down to 3, like these are the things, just in case somebody wasn't there, like myself who was on vacation, what would you say?
Is that all of us? You're asking all of us?
Anybody could go in there. Actually, we should all talk on that one. Yeah, top 3 takeaways.
I'd like to hear from them.
Top 3 takeaways for me. Well, one of them was that someone else's story shouldn't trigger me, and if it does, I need to seek the Lord why.
That's a good one.
Also, another one was I need to check my own preferences at the door of his house. So, when people come in, we have a proclivity based on how they dress, how they look, how they carry themselves, to be attracted to or repel from. And we need to assume the posture of this for everybody, that all are welcome, So I appreciate Rob talking about that. And then mercy over judgment,
Mm.
because that's what I want. And so therefore that means I need to be a conduit for doing that to others. Mercy over judgment.
Yeah.
That's
You
good.
hit the ones that I would say, but I'd love to hear Michelle's because I have one that I haven't heard yet that I love.
So I have to agree with Ray in the mercy over judgment, because I think in our culture we need to hear that a lot. And so, we are way too judgmental, way as a culture and a people. I one of my biggest takeaways, and maybe this is because I'm a teacher and I understand what you were trying to teach, is just that with enough prayer and working through a hard subject, we can find a way to teach about a hard subject with grace. Because I felt like you, in both services, even though you said second was a little bit more pointed than the first, people could hear you and relate to you, even though it's a hard subject. And I think because you didn't start off using what we might call trigger words, you were able to bring people in. And then the third thing, I was really struck, and I've heard your story multiple times. And I don't know if it's the way you said it, the order that you said it, but in your story, the part that stuck out to me was your dad walking into the room where your son was and walking out of the room and saying, that cannot be my grandson, and that was like your last interaction. And so I don't think I quite realized that what happened with your family happened in that way, and that it was all so tied to the ethnicity of your baby. And it just reminded me that in this discussion about helping the marginalized people in the world, we sometimes are going to have to pay a price. And I know your family wasn't that healthy, so in some ways it was probably good to have boundaries, but we all, no matter how difficult our family could be, we all want to experience love from our family. And so I can't even imagine the level of rejection that you had to work through as a new dad, letting your dad walk out of the room. That is a huge, huge price.
Yeah, that one was tough. And honestly, I shared a level of that for the first time publicly. I've shared it. I think Ray's heard that part. But there's a reason that it was the first time I said it publicly. So Jacob was 18 months old, and we had been through this weird 18 months of trying to figure out if my parents were in or out. And they were being, I think they tried. In their defense, I think they actually had tried for a little while. And then when some things went south in other areas, that was the final lynch point. The reason I have not shared that graphically or that specifically until recently is Jacob and I recently had the conversation about his memories of the day my dad walked out of the house. And it was sparked by him. And it was honestly the first time I looked my son in the eye and said, Jacob, it had everything to do with the fact that you are black. Biracial, and that he could see the black in you. And because he was almost 18. So he was ready for us to have that conversation when he was pushing in. And so now I felt free to share a little bit more graphically the exact interaction, because my son had heard it from me in a really safe environment where he was probing for questions and all of that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So those are all really good. And I would add all those. The one I enjoyed the most, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do just one, because I agree with all those. I think they summed it up pretty well. The sharing is caring as my closing point. Because which of us cannot relate to the idea that we want people to share with us? And so our responsibilities was intentionally framed in a Mr. Rogers way, frankly. Sharing is caring. I heard that message loud and clear in the middle of the chaos of my life. And then as I'm reading through this Gracism material, really for me sometimes, this is a little insight into my crazy mind. I'll hear somebody like Mr. Rogers in the background going, yeah, isn't that how we're supposed to treat our neighbor? You know, in his tone and that Fred Rogers tone. And so for me, being able to, God brought me to that. And I was kind of excited about it, actually. I'm like, because once I said, Mr. Rogers, anybody who was not disarmed already, I watched people's shoulders go down and go, well, now what am I going to say? You know, there were a few people. All I'm talking about is doing what Mr. Rogers taught us when we were kids.
Yep.
All James is talking about is sharing, is caring. If you care about someone, you share with them. If you don't share with them.
Well, and Mr. Rogers was way ahead of his time on this issue.
Oh, he was way.
Yeah, he sure was. So, forgive me. Yeah. So this idea of like, so off of the sharing is caring, and some people have what some people don't have. No, this is very controversial. One of the things that you used this as an example was a starting line, right? And how that, you know, just like if you were to do a relay race or something, different people start at different positions. So when the game of life starts, because of different things in our lives, we get different starting lines. Some of us have more advantages than others. One of the things that's really hard, now, even just me saying that has got people like, I don't know if I want to listen to this. One of the things that's really hard is that has nothing to do with how hard of a worker you are. That does not have anything to do with, you know, somebody being better or less than somebody else. It's just the reality that some people start off better than other people do. They just have an advantage in life. I mean, I feel like even my kids, you know, Nathan does not plan on going to college, but he has an advantage in life because he has parents that are just coaching him through that. Okay, so you don't plan on going to college. Here's some strategies you need to have. So when Nathan graduates high school and when he's 18, he's going to have some advantages in life. Does that mean Nathan's better or worse than somebody else? It just means he grew up in a house with parents who cared about giving him that advantage on how to even succeed without going to college. Now, you enter in the idea of race and the advantages that we have because of skin color and different things like that. It gets really tricky, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it. So I thought we would dive in to that in a gracious way. So if you're somebody listening right now and you're thinking, I struggle with that, I feel like I didn't have an easy life. You know, I built a business myself, or I did something by myself. I was not given a silver spoon, and I'm white and I'm a male, and I don't get this because I don't feel like I got a head start on the starting line. And when you start talking about this stuff, it bothers me. Let's just kind of discuss why and where why people feel different ways, I guess. Instead of trying to tell somebody how they should feel, let's just talk about how we get different starting lines.
So I'm driving home after our meeting this morning. I'm coming home to meet with my wife and hang out with her for a little bit before the craziness of Fallapalooza tonight and have some lunch. And a missed opportunity flooded into my brain, both from my sermon and even from our conversation earlier. And one that would have really helped to draw this point. I was brought up very poor. Didn't have any, I mean, if you had written my story based on what you saw at 1988, you would be like, okay, this is going to be a cyclical thing. This family's going to continue down this drug and alcohol, thing. And so basically, I didn't have a good starting line. I in the area that I grew up in, I started way in the back of the pack, not up the front. Here's the missed opportunity. My son is an African-American biracial child, right? My son, at the same age that I'm talking about, that's why I use 1988, his starting line is further ahead than my white starting line.
It's a great point.
Okay. However, now, here's where I draw the distinction. That's because I've leveraged my past to make his life better. To make sure that we raised him in a loving home where there's not a lot of yelling, there's no drinking, there's no drug use, there's no cheating, there's no going. So now here he is as an African-American. When people look at him, they see a black kid. Even though he's biracial, and to see a black child. Okay.
Mhm.
His starting line is further ahead than mine was. However, the reality is there's still people that are his age who are white, who are ahead of him, even though he's ahead of me. So the point is not as easy as saying all black people are at different starting lines, all white people have better starting lines. But I just want to use my son as a microcosm of this. Even though I've advanced him up and he is further than I was at the exact same age, there are still some things out of his control, hear that part, out of his control, that are going to hold him back.
So I love that you said that, Rob, because I feel like that is a great example. And I want to play the devil's advocate in these situations and try to guess. So this is me just assuming and guessing what somebody might be thinking. And then I'd love to hear the rebuttal to it. So this is not necessarily my thoughts, but just what somebody else might be thinking. Okay, so great example, Rob. But I feel like, or I'm representing somebody that racism is done, and if a African American boy wants to work hard and do the same things that a white boy or girl or whatever wants to do, then there's the same opportunities for me and them. I disagree with you, Rob. That would be what somebody might say. And I would love, Ray, you can say other things, but I would love you to use your example that you used during the racism class where you asked people if anyone wanted to trade. So here would be a rebuttal to that. So if what I said just resonates with you, listen to this rebuttal.
So my response to that would be, if you in fact are of the ilk that racism has ended, then would you ever seriously consider swapping places with me? You know, when I grew up, there was a movie called Soul Man, where a white guy became a black guy through, taking some pills and darkening his skin. And it was a really funny movie. And I think it was in the late 80s. But let's be honest. Would you trade places if you are a naturally born white male or black or white female? Would you want to become an African American? I'm not saying that you just will pick up culture stuff. I'm saying that you would rather live their life experience. And I don't think many people would.
Well, nobody took you up on it at Gracism Sunday.
With 100+ people in the room, nobody jumped up and said, "Oh, please."
Right.
And so let that say something. I mean, I'm not trying to be crass. I'm not trying to be, try to gotcha moment. I just want you to acknowledge that we all know something's not right. Anytime we have to make statements like the first Black or the first Asian or the first Latino, why are we saying these things in 2023?
Or the first woman.
Oh, right. Why? If everything has been fine, then why are we saying the first now? I mean, it is a thing, and it's a thing in the United States of America. When you look at how many presidents we've had, and only one of them, and none of them have ever been women, who's in control of that? With the fact that we weren't written into the Constitution and what level we were 3/5 of a human. And so it's just not as easy as electing an African-American president. And by the way, please don't use that one, because we didn't do it. We hold 13% of the votes, and that's if every last African-American registered to vote could vote. So it wasn't us that elected former President Barack Obama. It doesn't mean that racism is over. There's still work to do, because if it wasn't work to do, Jacob wouldn't have gotten chased home 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is a work
raising kids.
All of us. Yeah. I'm sorry, Rob.
No, I'm just saying somebody's still raising kids to do that. And it's like I said in my message, I want to be really clear here. I've really come to a place where I realize that 90%, at least in my sphere, to 95% of the white people that orbit around me are not overtly, willingly racist. I am not leveling that accusation on most of the people that I know. I'm not saying, hey, you're racist. But what I am saying is you cannot, it could be that you're not a racist, but you're also not standing up and sharing people to help fix the problem. So if you're not a racist, why push back against fixing the last vestiges in your mind of racism that are existing? Like, if you're not a racist, stand with people. And again, I don't say that accusingly or anything, because I really have come to realize most of the people that I know are not waking up with hatred in their heart for African Americans or Hispanics or Asians or anything. They're not. What we're missing is the point that, okay, now I don't hate a group of people, but do I share with them? Do I lift them up? Do I stand with them? And that's what my plea is becoming to my white brothers and sisters, is to say, you know, you probably have dealt with your racism, or you're not aware of some little racist things that are in there that are not on purpose. Be willing to let those things get pulled out of you. Even if you're not a racist, the system still isn't completely fixed. That exists still benefits. Sorry, guys that look like this. First and foremost.
That's a beautiful face, Rob. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So in our Gracism discussion groups, we had something come up that I think fits this discussion, which is that we had a Caucasian woman at our table whose husband was educated for his undergrad at a primarily Black educational college. And he was applying for jobs and couldn't get callbacks. And finally, he was able to get a job where he had made a connection and they knew him. And it is her opinion, after having watched him go through the process, that he was being racially profiled because of the college that was listed for his undergrad degree. And I found that to be really, really interesting, because I have heard lots of stories about things like how names that are more Black are sometimes profiled in job applications. And, you know, we didn't get into, and I haven't found out, and I don't have permission to share their whole story, but I cannot wait to ask some questions about this. Like, why was he at a primarily Black college, and what led to that? And, you know, all those things. But just to your point, Ray, just about, well, you know, he was highly qualified, but wasn't getting callbacks. And that's her opinion based on her experience as to why.
Yeah. And so let's play another scenario too. Just somebody in the church. I'm just making this up. So again, don't think that this is me saying this, but I'm just going to ask questions because I believe I'm saying what many people think. Okay. So I started my business at a young age, and I work harder than anybody else in my business in order to build my business. And I've picked myself up, and I've done all these different things to get to where I'm at. And I have fought. Nobody's been helping me. Nobody's given me any money. I didn't get an inheritance. I just worked and built. And here I am. And I can't help but look at other African American people, and I see that they don't want to work. What are you going to say to somebody who feels that way, but would never say that to you to your face? What are your thoughts?
Give me a name.
What do you mean by that? Give me a name.
Give me a name of somebody that you know that is doing exactly what you said. I'm not going to let you get away with making sweeping generalizations about an entire group of people because you've heard. No, I want to know a name of somebody that you know that is fitting that bill, that you have a personal relationship with, that is literally waiting on a government check or is refusing to work because they expect some type of handout. If you don't know, if you can't name a person, then you need to stop shaming or attempting to shame a group of people based on a political dog whistle.
Dude, that is the best advice, Ray.
Wow.
That is
Wow.
the best advice right there. Because it is so easy to make assumptions, general sweeps of a group of people, but do you really know somebody? Which means you would know their story, you would know their attempts at getting a job, you would know so much more, and it would change it. It's that was a good response, Ray.
Oh my
You're
gosh.
not kidding.
Wow.
I can think of other places that I could use that people have said things to me that I would be like, okay, so name one.
Who do you know that that's their experience? That's who they, how they, that's what they do. That's really
Yeah. Wow.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take off the I mean, guys, I'm only digging into this because I think this is real. I think
I
that what
love
we're
it.
talking about
Yeah.
is about as real as it gets. I think that there are a lot of people that feel this way. Like a lot. So let's just take off the whole work thing and just say, somebody who doesn't want to work, and so I am a person who I would say, I have built all this my whole life. Why can't these people do it? Because I did it. And why do I have to share with them? Because nobody shared with me.
I'm going to give a first part of an answer, but there's
And by the
probably
way, don't get mad at me, guys. I'm just asking these
I'll
questions.
leave it to whoever that person is right now. So I'm going to make one assumption. The person you're talking about is a Christian.
Yep.
So if they're a Christian, Philippians 2 and walk away. Because Philippians 2 says we're to share all that we have. That we are to follow the example of Jesus of laying down all of our stuff for the betterment of the kingdom of God. So there's your theological answer. And I don't mean to sound too snarky to that person, but the bottom line is if you're a Christian, it's because the Bible tells you so. You sang the song when you were a kid. Okay? So there's this reality. The secondary thing I would say is why are you comparing yourself to other people? You're doing that. They're not sitting over there. I mean, you might not know them. You don't know what they think. And they may feel blessed beyond what you feel. You just don't know it because you're so. And my final thing would be without all those people, who's coming to your business? You didn't do this on your own. People showed up. They pulled up to your coffee house, to your real estate business, to your clothing store, to your restaurant, they came and contributed to your success. But the Christian one, for the Christian, I just need you to know Philippians 2 and the verses about the least of these, that should be enough to pretty much answer that question for you.
That's good. Did you have any sorry.
17 says every good and perfect gift comes from your hard work. It don't say that. It don't say that. It says every good and perfect gift comes from him.
The Father.
Somebody gave you good health to operate said business. Somebody protected you from those long days and long nights of working your fingers through the bone, by the way, that made sure you didn't have an accident on your way home when you were half dead tired. It was somebody that woke you up the next morning so you could get to that job. Somebody is at work and their favor is upon you. That's why you are experiencing the success. Sure, you showed up and sure you applied your knowledge, your skills and talents. But just like a farmer who plants tirelessly every year seeds, expecting a harvest, it doesn't say that you create the harvest. No, he is the Lord of the harvest. And that's whether you have a coffee shop, whether you have an automotive place, whether you're an insurance agent, whether you're a pastor, it is him that is the God of the harvest.
You know, I think it's so interesting. I thought of this morning in our discussion, but I didn't have a chance to say it. You know, Ray, you're talking about it's God that gives us everything. And Philip, you started from a place of asking about people that have worked hard to get there, which I think is an American ideal. Okay. It is an American value to say, I worked hard. This is the land of opportunity. I've made something of myself. I mean, and that applies to almost anybody that's here. That's just something that we value in America. And it made me think about how high we hold that value, and think about Israel. And, you know, we're kind of in love with how hard we work. And I wonder if we could rest as a society. You know, we all take a Sabbath. If we could rest, if we would be so emotionally tied our own value to our work. I mean, that's part of why God made Israel rest, because he didn't want them to be slaves. And sometimes I have been a slave to my own idea of what success is. I won't quit. I keep pushing. I keep going. Not as much as I used to do when I was younger, but, you know, because I had this idea of what success is. And so I'm going to get it. I mean, I'm a hard charger. They don't call me a bulldog for no reason. I mean, I am tenacious. But sometimes the Lord says, rest, because I want you to see that I can provide for you even when you're not working. And I think that's hard for us as Americans. That's why we can't rest.
So wait, Michelle, Pastor Michelle, are you saying that this is an idol?
I thought about that word. Yes, I didn't use it, but yes, it could be an idol.
There it is. It's on the table now.
I remember, I think that we would all be lying if we didn't say that pride will sneak into our lives occasionally. And nobody wants to be told they're prideful. You tell somebody they're prideful, they're going to just move on around you. And, you know, it's not helpful a lot of times to just say, quit being prideful. But I will tell you, in my life, I have seen, there was a season where everything was successful. I mean, in the beginning of my ministry, I was just leading worship at things and they were just growing. Like, I would go to a church and the church like doubled in its size. And then another church would be like, come over here and, you know, help us build a worship team. The church would double in size. And I didn't know I was prideful. If somebody would have said, Philip, you have pride, I would have been like, no, I don't. I wouldn't have, I don't think I could have even seen it. But I'll tell you, about 7 years in, I went somewhere and God just took his anointing off of my life. I mean, he just kind of let me sing music without him. And it was just, you know, and I got to see just how much I was doing and just how much God was doing. And it was the hardest 2 years of my life, but it was a cornerstone. You know, cornerstone's not the right word. It was a marking in my, what would be the word, Michelle, or somebody who's a word person?
Standing stone, like a memorial in your life.
It was a thing that I can look back
Mm-hmm.
at. And I will never forget those 2 years. That is not me. That anytime that the Spirit of God moves, it is a beautiful and glorious thing, but it has nothing to do with me. I'm just ready and available and facilitating if I'm so blessed to get to be a part of it, you know. And I think that a lot of people with their work, and I can actually speak into this because I did build a business over the last 3 years, 2 years. It's hard work. It's hard work to build a business, but it has nothing to do with me. And if God doesn't want me to do it, I won't be able to do it anymore. You know, it won't, it's God that sustains, it's God that it's the customers, it's everything. And so I don't know. I just want to say that because nobody thinks that they are experiencing pride, or they don't think that they have an idol. But if you can just for a second look at your life and ask a few questions, you might see something in there that you could remove before God has to.
Well, back to, you know, the way pride comes in and does that. In my sermon, I actually went out of my way to point out that absolutely God honors your hard work. Yes, you could have said to God, no, thank you, not put any of the work in, and ended up not having the success that you're having. You had that choice, one way. But it doesn't work in the reverse. God is the one that is consistent. We're the one that has to make a choice. God would love to bless us. God wants to bless us, but we have to step into the work. And so, yeah, if you worked hard and you built a business, especially if you came from what could be seen as nothing, great job. Nobody is taking that away from you. But when you put God in the right place, you realize who really owns the business. And when you realize who really owns the business, you begin to see it as an avenue and a vehicle for helping to go back to one of our other sayings, lift someone else up. I can think of names that we could all name names of people in our ministry throughout the years that have been some of the wealthiest people that we've known. You know, I think 2 churches ago of a man who he was wealthy because he could be trusted with the money, because he was giving money away right and left in a really healthy way, not like enabling way, but in a way of lifting people up.
Right.
So it's like, great. Now God gave you you did the hard work. God gave you the blessing. You're going to answer for what you did with that.
Yep.
If you can sleep at night, then you're doing fine. Don't let us make you feel different. If God is really letting you, good. But like Ray said way back at the first part, if something about what we're saying, which is not directed at any people, by the way, none of us, we're not saying so-and-so and so-and-so.
No,
Why
we're
do
not.
you feel it's directed at you? Then answer that question between you and God. And why did that prick me a little bit? Or why did that make me upset?
So I think this is very helpful and extremely controversial conversation. And I think it is helpful because it's real. I think that it's getting to the bone of how a lot of people might feel. And we don't even make the assumption that by hearing this podcast, you're going to change your mind, but maybe you hear a different point of view, you know, and it might be a work towards an understanding. We'll just say that. So let's just kind of the last question. We're running low on time, but we all have our own stories, you know, and when we share our stories, it can sometimes be perceived that we're making statements about other people, but really we're just sharing our version of what our story is. Can we talk about what we mean when we say that? So if Rob, you know, in his sermon talks about, he says, this is my story. I'm not saying this is yours, but this is my story. Why each of us gets to have that? I don't know really what the question is, but like, can we discuss this and kind of the rubbing points and hopefully help people see that when a story is shared, it's not an accusation or a general sweeping statement. It's a personal experience. I think the more I talk, the more I'm answering the question, but I just want us to discuss.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's a double-edged sword as a communicator. Okay. So we tell stories because we want people to identify with what we're saying. I mean, Jesus taught with story. And a good story draws people in and helps them understand our experience or the point that we're trying to make. I think where it crosses into a challenge is if someone is telling a story manipulatively. And so I have been in places where there were stories or comments made from the pulpit that maybe shouldn't have been made. Okay. Or like Rob, if you had maybe not checked out like that story with Jacob before you told it, okay, that wouldn't have been fair to Jacob. But, and so we want to be careful of those things, but people also have to be careful of their hearts, because just because we tell a story that makes you feel a certain way, it could be that's the Holy Spirit pricking your heart. And so sometimes as a communicator, we're as long as we're careful not to be manipulative in what we're doing from the pulpit, then we have to leave where the story falls with the people that are hearing it. But that can be difficult. And so, you know, when the Holy Spirit convicts somebody, I think that's what Rob was saying earlier, you know, that somebody can get mad at us. And so I don't know if that's what you want to talk about, but I think that's the problem, is when the people in the seats discerning when it is God at work.
Mm-hmm.
versus, you must have been listening in on my dinner conversation last night.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really good, Michelle, because here's the other tricky thing as a communicator. I do kind of want to make sure that my story is bringing you into an uncomfortable place.
Sure.
That's what we're trying to do. And I don't mean that manipulatively. I mean that because
Right.
I'm trying you to see what God has shown me. Now,
Right.
I'm not going to convince you. He's going to convince you. So if it doesn't apply to you, then take the parts of it that God's giving you and let the other ones go. And so this is really tricky. I do want more white men to stand on a stage and say what I said. I did not apologize for being a white man. I went out of my way to make sure that I am who I am. I don't apologize that I was born white and that I'm a man. I don't. What my apology is for, however, it continues to be for, is taking so long to engage in not the battle. That's the wrong word. That just sounds so violent. In the struggle and the support of people that for too long I didn't realize needed people that looked like me to stand up next to them, not for them, but with them. So when we're telling a story where I'm saying racist guy turns into advocate for, your story might be never been racist. I've already been advocating. Fantastic. Or your story may be, man, maybe I'm racist, but I'm not calling you racist. I want to be really clear. I can tell you my heart is not to say to anybody, unless you're my friend and we're sitting at a dinner table and you say something racist. And I'm like, hey, let's talk about that. But I'm never going to take a microphone and stand up in front of 300 people and people online and call you, insert your name here, a racist. It's just not in my DNA to do that to somebody.
And that is the point that I was getting at, is like Rob can share the story of how he grew up and how he's changed, but by him sharing that does not make a general sweeping statement about everybody else. And I don't know why it's so hard for us to understand that, but that's a hard one to get. So if that's a struggle for you, I hope that you hear this. Did you have anything on that, Ray, too? Or, I mean, to me, you have a story as an African American.
Right. Dr. Anderson talked about that when we are doing this type of work, the work of reconciliation, the work that Jesus actually left us with to do, that this is part of discipleship, reconciling us to one another so we can be reconciled unto him. He said that culturally, what happens is what's triggered in majority culture men tends to be shame. And he said that's the thing that we have to figure out how to mitigate, that this is not about trying to shame anybody. It's trying to awaken you to a reality. Rob said it best. He apologized for that it took him this long to get involved. My desire is that you would understand that, sure, you didn't build the system. You were not in the room in 1775 and 76. You didn't do that. But what I need you to understand is that there were other people that weren't in the room either. And they weren't written into the Constitution. And so because of how the system is constructed, I need you to stand up and stand with me to say, hey, I cry foul. I cry foul. Why did you tell my friend, why did you suggest to my friend that they should move down there rather than move in the same neighborhood you took me to? I need you to stand up for when you're standing waiting to be seated and you see a couple that's been sitting there for a while and they call you to say, wait a minute, ask them, have you been helped? And if they say no, or they may say thank you for thinking of us, I just need you to choose to either stand up for or stand with. If you have relationship with, come on now. I need you to stay. I need you to protect me. And that's what this is about. Jesus stood up for us.
Yeah.
He stood up for us. we deserve death. He said, no, I'll take that.
Yeah.
If we're truly going to be the believers, the followers of Jesus that we say we are, then we need to do what Jesus did. And Jesus never once said, you know what, I ain't got to take this. I'm from heaven. I'm out.
I didn't eat
He
that
never-
apple.
Right. I didn't mess up.
On this one.
That's a good one, Philip. It was that other dude's fault.
Mhm.
Jesus said that.
No, he just comes in and says, I see a need. I'm here to meet it. Yep. So I hope this podcast helps people to see things differently. And, even if you don't feel the way some of these things we've talked about, that's not you, maybe you find yourselves in conversations with other people and you can share this and say, you know what, there's a podcast I was listening to and they were talking about this same idea. I want to send it to you. You don't have to agree with them, but just to hear some people discussing this thing in a diverse situation, people trying to get it right. Listen to what they say and see how you feel about it. Because I'm not a big believer that all of a sudden somebody is going to be like, oh, you said this and now all of a sudden I'm different. It's a process. It's an awakening to seeing things. And so anything that moves us further along in this process of seeing people better is always good. So there you go. Well, you guys exhaust me, these tough subjects. I gotta go get ready for Fallapalooza.
Me too.
All right.
I'm half ready.
Well, I'm gonna sign us off, but we love everybody and thanks for being a part of this, doing the work with us on these subjects. So we'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Eastlake Community Church is an intentional, multicultural community empowered by the Holy Spirit. We passionately pursue a loving relationship with God and everyone Jesus was sent to die for, here, near, and far.